Okay, so thank you for this opportunity to attend mantra retreat. I live in Utah normally, as Prabhu said, and I attended my first mantra retreat last year on Zoom, and ended up very inspired at the end of the weekend with some really good presentations and the drama that was premiered there and all of that. So I really jumped at the opportunity, especially this year it's in Yogadava in such beautiful environments and settings. So thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot to me, and I've already gained so much from your association that I'm looking forward to all day today and tomorrow as well. So the topic for today is the art of meaningful association, and or another title that I gave it earlier was the joys and challenges of association in Krishna consciousness. I think all of us probably, or many of us probably remember a time when we were first encountering devotees and really being overwhelmed by the beauty and positivity of association with devotees in Krishna consciousness, building friendships within a Vaishnava community, and having prasad with people, and just the excitement and euphoria that brings when someone is first becoming a devotee. I never had that experience myself because, as Hanumatpresaka Swami said earlier, I grew up in a family of devotees, and so for me, association for the early part of my life was just a given, as in, I just, what else are you going to do but be a devotee when your parents are devotees and your house is a temple and you're running a Govinda's restaurant? And so there's association everywhere. And it was like, people would come and visit from different places. It was not until, so my experience was not so much gaining association as it was my first time losing that association. And that was the time I got my first job, first permanent job as a tenure-track professor. So I'd grown up in Boise, Idaho, and my parents had worked hard to create an association there for us growing up. Then went to study in Oxford, and I was very fortunate to be amongst devotees who were also studying at Oxford University. We were living together and holding morning programs together and so on. And then my first job was a temporary one as a visiting professor at the University of Florida. And I lived in Krishna House and ate Krishna lunch every day and there was association. So far everything was good. Association was for granted. But then, when I got my first tenure-track job, which is a job that can last for a long time, it was at Center College in Kentucky, in Danville, Kentucky. And the closest devotees the closest devotee family was about 2.5 hours away. And the closest temple was like 4 hours away. And I was all alone. I had just, and it was the first time that I lost association in my life, and really it was such a valuable experience because for the first time I came to appreciate what association meant in my life. And the question that always that was kind of front and center during that time for me was, if I lose this association, will there be anything left of my Krishna consciousness? Mm-hmm. In other words, was my being a devotee so far just a result of my environment? And in reality, I was empty inside. And without that association, everything would come tumbling down. And so it was kind of like this challenge. Oh, am I a devotee on my own? Can I be a devotee on my own? And the answer was no. It was no. I couldn't. And initially I thought, oh, this is terrible. And I discussed this with elders and seniors and my spiritual master, Hanumatpresaka Swami. And he said something that was really useful to me at that time. I asked him, what do you do when you don't have association? And he said, you get association. You never not have association. There's no like fighting it out in bhakti. on your own. And there's no such thing. And the reason for that is because it goes against the very definition of what bhakti is. You remember chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the yogi, dhyana yogi, meditation. One of the things he says, he tells the yogi to do is go to a solitary place. Means go be alone. The Jnanis are famous for being in their study all alone, surrounded by books, and thinking great thoughts. But for bhakti, the very word bhakti comes from the root bhaj, which means to share. It means to worship, but more foundationally, it means to share. And so bhakti cannot, by definition, be done alone. When Krishna describes the bhakta, what does he say? That verse I love very much. He says, Machitta madkrita prana bodhayanta paraspara. He uses the word paraspara. Para means other, para means other. Para together make paraspara, which means one another. Right? It means other. Bhakti is all about others. Tushyanticha ramanticha. You take pleasure in being with others. And so that's when I realized I need to get married. Seriously, I went to my parents and I said, I think I am ready to get married now. And Radhika Ramana actually gave me some really good advice when I was at University of Florida. He said, are you planning to get married? And I said, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. And he said, no, you need to get married. And I said, but why? He said, because you're a professor. Do you want to be a professor? I said, yes. He said, then you need to get married. I said, yeah, otherwise I end up marrying one of my students. He said, no, you're too smart for that. But you'll just end up with one of your students. So that really was like, yeah. This was on a drive from Gainesville to Lachu when I was living at Krishna House. And when I went to Center College in Kentucky, those words, I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the moment, right? I'm not in association. I don't have people around me. I'm all alone here. I need to get married. Or I need to go join a brahmacharya ashram. Right? None of this limbo. It's not going to work. Not for me. So, anyway, that's kind of my story of association. And I'm very grateful. It was only 2 years in Kentucky, one of which I was not married, and by the second year I was married. And I'm very grateful for that time because it taught me something crucial about bhakti, which is that there is no pride, there is no success in doing it alone. It's not a matter of, no matter of accomplishment to say I did it on my own, because there is no such thing. If you did it on your own, you're probably doing karma or jnana or dhyana. Bhakti has to be done in company with others. Excuse me, sorry. So that's that little prelude. But basically, I want to talk about three things: the power of association, assessing our association, and finally creating association. So the first thing I want to do is ask us to think about what association means. And here, I want to identify association at 3 levels. Okay? And we find all 3 in our scriptures. All 3 are discussed frequently. The first one is conformity. Part of what association does is it inspires us to conform to whatever is socially acceptable in the group that we hang out with. There used to be a time in Western thought about human beings, in the period of the Enlightenment up to that point, where people thought human beings are islands unto themselves, and when they need something, some cooperation becomes convenient, they go out and they meet other people and they create a family, and families lead to communities, and communities lead to society. So then the idea of the social contract, that man is one, alone, and self-sufficient, but for convenience, for enjoyment, for other peripheral reasons, safety, we create contracts with others, and we create societies and groups. One of the big changes in the study of sociology in the 19th century was basically blowing that idea apart. Was the idea that was the recognition that human beings don't just happen to be part of groups by choice. We are fundamentally part of groups. It's who we are. We cannot avoid it. It's not a choice we make. It's part of our very nature, our fabric. Eastern cultures, I mean China and India, have had this notion for thousands of years. If you read Confucian thought, for example, it's very clear that as human beings, our group identities are our identities. We don't happen to be part of a group. That's what makes us who we are. Our families, our societies, our communities, and so on. Same thing if you look at ancient India as well. But the idea that we're fundamentally part of groups and the influence it has since then been studied at length by psychologists. It's become very clear, and I'm sure you've probably heard of some of these really interesting, extraordinary studies that have been done to show the power of the group over the individual. Here's one example, perhaps you've heard before. There's psychologists set up this fake doctor's office where people come in, and what do they have to do? They have to sit there and wait for their turn to be called. And there's 2 people in the doctor's office already seated there who are actors. And when the first real patient, non-actor, comes in, that person sits down, and there's a beep sound that goes off in the doctor's office, a sound, a beep. And as soon as the beep goes off, the 2 people who are actors stand up. And then when the beep goes off, they sit down again. And the lady there goes, what? So she just ignores it. And, who knows who's in a doctor's office? And this happens again. And the 2 stand up. And she says, okay. And the 3rd time it happens, guess what happens? Well, guess what she does? Okay, now here's the amazing part. Person number 4. Okay, no more actors. Everyone's real customers. Person number 4 comes in, sees this happening. After the 2nd beat, joins it. One by one, the original actors get called into the doctor's office. That is off the stage. Now there's no actors at all. Person number 5 comes in, 6 and 7. Guess what everyone does? When it beeps, everyone stands up. Now there's a whole group dynamic taking place when no one told anyone to do anything. And no one asks ever in that whole experiment, why are we doing this? They just think it's a social norm. There's many experiments of this type. One more I'll just mention. 4 people, actors, 5th person shows up. And someone's showing them 3 lines, A, B, and C. They're obviously of different lengths. A is the shortest, B is next, C is the longest. The question is simple. Which line is the shortest? Actor number 1 says C. The answer is obviously A. And the 4th guy's like, what's wrong? This next person says C. The 3rd person says, well, obviously C. By the time it gets to the 4th person, guess what he says? C. Now, here's the amazing part. Not with everyone, but with a few people. So after this is done, they tell each person, they say, okay, we just want to admit 3 of these guys are actors. you want to reconsider your decision? Which one's the longest or shortest? And a lot of people switch back to A. They say, okay, it's A. I just didn't want to look bad. But here's the shocking thing. I forget what the percentage is, but a certain percentage refuse to change their vote, even after knowing. They genuinely believe that it's C is the shortest. Not because they're stuck in their ways and they don't want to look bad. They're like, no, it is C. And they have to physically bring out a ruler to prove it to them that A is the shortest. And this was a shocking thing for psychologists to recognize that human perception is influenced by conformity to group. We actually see and hear different things. It's a possibility when we're in a group dynamic. Our perception can change. So on the one level, association means that we find the right group to conform to. Because we're going to conform to some group, right? I've already made that clear. That's not where Prabhupada says many different places. He says human beings are social animals. And he likes quoting that phrase, birds of a feather flock together. Right? This is conformity. We're social animals, we're going to do what's around us. But conformity is not all there is to association. Otherwise, people will become devotees just because they were born in a family of devotees. Right? And we know that's not always the case, or just because you hang out with devotees a lot. Conformity is not if you just hung out with doctors, you become a doctor. No, conformity is not enough. There's another level to association. And that's shaping of character. The famous line in Bhagavad Gita, Sanjat Sanjayate Kama. Our desires are a product of the association we keep. And we hear about this endlessly in the scriptures, about how by the type of association we have, we can become thieves, or we can become saints. We smoke, or we give up smoking. Everything we're shaped by the association we have. As children, we look at our parents, and our character is shaped before the age of 5, before we can think reasoned thoughts and logical arguments. Our nature, our moral values are shaped by that association. As young people, we look to our peers in college or in high school to shape our character and our behavior. As adults, we try very hard to keep up with the Joneses and to keep up with our neighbors and to be socially acceptable, and we shape our character accordingly, right? So shaping character is something, again, that shouldn't come as a surprise. When sociologists talk about nature versus nurture, you've probably heard this debate before. What influences us more? The nature we're born with, or our nurture, the association, the environment that we have? No one can tell. No, there's no good decision about this. They're both so powerful, a person's individual nature and the environment they have. But association simply, the power of association is not fully described, even by this, even by the shaping of character. And here's why. Because this is still treating us as passive beings. We are being affected by our association, and that's a fact. But where's the agent? How are we affecting things? Both of these treat us as objects that are affected, as passive. Where's our role in the picture? And so the third aspect of association that I want to point out is thinking of ecosystems, thinking of association not merely as conformity or shaping of character, but association as an ecosystem. Here's what I mean. In any ecosystem, every person or every being who's in that ecosystem is affected by that environment, but also they shape that environment themselves. Right? So you take a plant that doesn't belong to West Virginia, you put it here, or you take peacocks, for example. right? And you bring them to West Virginia. The peacocks are not native, as far as I know, to West Virginia. When they come here, they're going to adapt in certain ways to their environment. They're going to do things here that they won't do in India, and they won't do things that they do here. They're going to learn how to work in this environment. They're going to be shaped by it. But the other side of things is that they're going to shape the environment they're in. They're going to affect the ecology of New Vrindavan. So when we think of association as an ecosystem, we come to recognize that every one of us in the community of devotees not only is shaped by that association, so that we have to be careful to avoid the wrong association, we have to be careful to find the good association, but also that we are contributing to the community of devotees in a way that indelibly changes the environment around us. It affects it. And what that means is that in the practice of bhakti, both in this world, in the temporal world, and in the transcendent realm, we each have a unique and irreplaceable role to play. Think even as far as the spiritual world. Think of the ecology, the ecosystem of Braj, of Vrindavan. Every gopi and every gopa has a specific role to play that contributes in a unique way to Krishna's pastimes. And they are affected by the roles everyone else is playing. So without someone like Jatila or Kutila, Radharani's mother-in-law, Krishna's pastimes with Radharani would not have the same excitement. She plays a very important role in keeping Radha away from Krishna and provides all the challenges of their meeting that make it an exciting thing. She's got that role to play. That's a crucial part of the ecosystem. Even thorns are important in an ecosystem. There's one very nice example in Chaitanya Charitamrita where there's one devotee in Jagannath Puri, and he's a little critical of others, not just for the sake of fault finding, but he's trying to enforce standards of practice. So he's like, you didn't wake up in time, and you're like, this is too much prasad for you, and you're supposed to wash your hands before you take prasad, and you took the arti with your left hand, not your right. He was that kind of person. And Mahaprabhu pulled him aside at one point and said, your seva for the Lord is very valuable, it's very important, but it's needed in Bengal, not in Jagannath Puri. And so he sent him away. But why? Because he gave a reason. He said, in Bengal, there are a lot of young devotees becoming devotees, and they need that kind of guidance that you're providing them about how to behave and how to act. And here in Puri, this was Mahaprabhu's most intimate associates. We're in a different mood, right? And so your service will be better received in that ecosystem. So in other words, Mahaprabhu was placing devotees in different places. And you find this in when they all come to visit him. They all come together to Puri for the Rath Yatra every year. Mahaprabhu's appreciating everyone's environment and the seva they're doing, and helping them to participate fully in his movement by finding the right environment where they can be a contributing member and also receive association from others. So with any ecosystem, we contribute and we are contributed back. Okay? So this is kind of some background. When we think of association, yes, conformity, group dynamics is a part of it. Yes, it shapes our character, but ultimately we want to think in terms of community and not just leave it at this level. Oh, I don't want to associate with this person, and this person I'd much rather associate with because I want to be like them, and this person will help me move up in bhakti, and this person is going to drag me down. but really say, what's my place in the community of Vaishnavas? What's my contribution? And how am I going to be affected by it? Okay. Because association have all of these aspects, the acharyas wax eloquent about the power of association. Rupa Goswami says it's one of the 5 most potent aspects of devotional service. The Nectar of Instruction, a third of the book or more, is all about association and how to associate. When Rupa Goswami says there's 6 things that can destroy bhakti, one of them is bad association. When he talks about 6 things that support bhakti, 2 of them are about association. One is finding good association, the second is giving up bad association. On and on and on. Our acharyas just describe it endlessly. And the Bhagavatam as well. Stories of Ajamana and his fall down from association, and so on. But we know these. We know these as devotees. Okay, so if association is this important, the practical question is, how do we manage our association? How do we distinguish between different kinds of association? When are we receiving association? When are we creating it? How do we practically apply this important of a practice in bhakti? And I think that's the crucial thing here, is assessing our association. I think with all of us, myself included, we operate in many different environments. For myself, I have a home environment. As much time as I spend at home, I spend at work, right? If we don't count sleeping, which is kind of a lonely affair. But if you've got, 8 hours at work, you've got whatever's left at home, and then you have association at your local temple and various communities you might travel to, you might come to New Vrindavan, right? So we have different realms of association that we operate in. And for me, it's always been kind of a challenge, a question, to say, how do I manage my association? Because you're faced with all kinds of association in the world. And one thing that we're asked not to do is find a cave in the Himalayas where we can hide ourselves, right? We're told we need to be out there in the world. We need to participate. And especially if you're married and you're working, you're out there in the world. You're associating. And so over the years, I've developed this practice for myself, which I wanted to share with you. And then perhaps you all have practices also to assess your association that you can share afterwards. But I like to do what I call an association audit. Okay? An audit of my association. To say, okay, where is the quality of my association at? If we go back to Krishna's verse in the Gita, Sangat Sanjayate Kama, right, that our association shapes our desires. That means that one of the ways to assess our association is by assessing our desires. By assessing our aspiration. Desire sounds too superficial. Kama is something deeper. It's our deepest longings. In that verse, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangaseshu Pajayate. The desire as a superficial thing is the first step, Dhyayato. That's like, oh, I want strawberry ice cream right now. Okay, that's Dhyayato Vishayan. But by the time it comes to Kama, we're talking about something much deeper. And these are the things that drive you in life, things that move you, that really are your aspirations, which get you out of bed every morning and make you motivated, your ambitions. That's Kama. Not just, oh, what do I want right now? So, when I do an association audit, there's 3 questions that I ask myself. whose approval matters most to me? Whose approval matters most to me? How do I measure my success? And with whom do I feel the most fulfilled? Okay, fulfilled, content. Okay, so once again, whose approval matters most to me? We all try to live up to other people's expectations. And I think the idea of good association, the idea of bhakti, makes that not a negative thing, but just a reality. We all attempt to please. We all live up to expectations from society, community, family, friends, bosses, children, parents, right? We all live up to someone's expectation. So looking inside and saying, whose approval matters to me the most? Right? Think about this in your own life, even as we're talking. Who do you really want to make happy? Whose approval are you hankering for? Sometimes, I don't mean this on a superficial level. I need to get my boss's approval to do my job. Every year we have an annual review and I have to get good marks on it. That's something. But whose approval, when you don't get, do you feel really disappointed that you've somehow let someone down? Second thing is, how do you measure your success? What's success mean? It's often said that success means being admired in the eyes of your peers. Who are those peers? How do you measure your success? This is what it means to be a successful person. And again, another way to get at that is through, again, not superficial. I want to be successful this way or that way. But when does failure really hurt? When do you feel that you've really failed someone? That person or those people. And finally, where do you feel the most content or fulfilled? At home. The flip side of that might be, who are you embarrassed to be with? Having studied in the academic world, and that means reading a lot of books, and especially in religious studies, and especially in Sanskrit, learning the language and reading all these shastras and so on. For me, one litmus test on this last point of where do you feel content or who are you embarrassed to be with? One of my tests for making sure that I was doing okay on the path of bhakti in terms of association was to see whether I would be able to happily and willingly sit in any Bhagavatam class and gain something from it. This is just specific to my field, but very often what happens for devotees who are studying in academia, it becomes more and more difficult to listen to Bhagavatam classes. This person's not pronouncing that verse properly. Can you like that? They just completely butchered that verse. Or they don't know the history of it, do they? They're making this point and they don't understand the history and the background behind it. Or they haven't worked out the full implications of what they just said there. Right? That has these consequences. And all of those things may be true. Right? It's not that, you have to put a wool over your eyes. It's true. It could be true. But the ability to sit in a class, and so what happens is over time, you're not able to listen. And for me, that was kind of like, okay, that's going to be my test, right? My litmus test is to say, I want to be able to sit in Bhagavatam class, doesn't matter by who. It may be the most beginning devotee, right? But there's a message being said there. What does that message mean to me? How is that message relevant to me? aside from the confusing arguments, aside from whatever mispronunciation there may be, there's a message there. And that message is relevant to me, even if I have a PhD, just as much as it is relevant to others. Right? So who do you feel comfortable with? Who do you feel fulfilled with, content with? That's something association is something we have to audit constantly. Right? We have to measure, because what happens is over time, it's a very gradual, very subtle process. But we start appreciating different kinds of association over time. And we start appreciating association and enjoying it that doesn't align with our values, with our goals for ourselves. So if you ask these three questions, right, or at least this is what I try to do. Whose approval matters to me? Who do I measure my success against? And with whom am I most content? And if the answers to those questions, the people who I answer those questions to, being genuine, right? I'm just answering for myself. This is not a public thing. So if the people are not the people whom I want to be like, those people, the answer to that question does not align with my values and my goals as a human being, as a devotee, then it's time for an association change. There's time to adjust the association I'm in, or to get me more of the type of association that I want to be. And it's amazing how often that is the case. Because over time we imbibe the values of the people who are around. And unless we do an association audit regularly, it can become, we can wander off the path of bhakti very easily without even knowing. Okay, so we find that our association needs to be adjusted. Almost always our association needs to be adjusted. How do we make that adjustment? Well, we look at the 3 or the 6 things that Rupa Goswami describes in Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita, that I'm sure most people here have heard of before. Right? That famous verse, Dadati pratigrihnati guhyamachati prachati bhungte bhojete chaita shadvidam priti lakshana. There's 6 symptoms of love or association, priti lakshana. Giving and receiving gifts, revealing your mind in confidence and hearing another person speak theirs, and feeding and being fed. Now, I want to ask you, think of these 6 things. What do you notice about these 6 things? What properties or attributes, what strikes you about the list, that either its structure or its content of the list that Rupa Goswami gives us? Giving and receiving gifts, feeding and receiving food, sharing your mind in confidence and receiving it. What strikes you about this? Yes?
So everything's reciprocal. It's very interesting that everything has a corresponding, right? Give, receive, give, receive.
Yes. Excellent. It's reciprocal, right? It's that ecosystem we talked about. It's not just conformity. That's not how he defines association. It's not even just, it's going to shape your character. The 2 verses before that are more like that. They're like, give up bad association. Stick with good association. There's more the sense of you're going to be changed by your association. But by this verse, Rupa Goswami is very much talking about ecosystem now. Sure. They're going to affect you, and you're going to affect them. What's your association footprint in the world? Right? How are you affecting the world around you? It's not just about what we're doing when we're in the temple. It's about we're out there in the world. How is someone being affected by your association? Right? We'll talk more about that a little later. Yes?
The word sustaining comes to mind.
Why?
Well, start backwards with offering prasad. This is how we're sustained.
Yes.
Our very body, our total atma, right? But then on the other levels also, psychologically and emotionally, there's the sustaining.
Yes, wonderful. I really like that. Each one of these reciprocal elements is sustaining, it's nourishing of the human being, the full human being. Right? Excellent. Yes.
It's very concretized. It's concrete, tangible. It's not just in the realm of feeling or sentiment. There's actual feelings and some physicality.
Yes, so let me repeat that. Like Prabhu was saying, there's a physicality to it. These are very concrete. It's not, the list that Rupa Goswami gives us is not just, like feelings that you have for others. It's a very down-to-earth sort of activity. These three exchanges, these three concrete exchanges, they're not just picked out of a hat, out of all the other types of exchanges you could have. Sociologists and anthropologists tell us that these are the foundational activities that define a community and a society. Who you eat food with defines who you are. Right? When we talked this morning about the caste system, what was the one thing or two things that the caste system regulated more than anything else?
Where you eat your food.
Where you eat your food and who you marry. Right? These two were the most highly enforced of anything, not just in the caste system, any social system enforces conformity by these two things. Who you eat with and who you marry. Why? Because they're regulating association. Who you share your mind with, the other thing is gift giving. Right? As we do it, we think, this is just something I got to do on Christmas and I have to do on Diwali, and it's their birthday, so can you go find a gift? But once again, it's sometimes the reality belies what's actually there. And sociologists tell us that the giving of gifts is one of the foundational ways in which societies hold themselves together. Even when that gift feels like it's just something you have to do, even if it's just re-gifting, it's actually doing something really meaningful, very powerful. So Rupa Goswami's list of these 6 things, they're concrete and they're tangible because they're not just picked out of the hat. These are the things that shape a society together. Yes, Prabhu?
They're all very simple.
They're all very simple. I'm just asking for quick responses here, so it's okay if the mic doesn't go around. I will repeat every one of them so that everyone can hear. Can you explain what you mean by simple?
Anyone can take part. It's really accessible, all these things are really accessible.
Excellent. So this is not association. It's like association means worshiping the Lord on the altar with other brothers. No. Association means performing a fire yajna together. No. These are things that every man, woman, child, every human being engages in. Very accessible. Excellent. What else? Yes, Prabhu.
Just hearing you talk about it, I'm just seeing it demands an intense amount of vulnerability. Because I'm supposed to get food, but food keeps me alive, and what if there's not enough food? And I'm accepting food from you, but a lot of people kill people by giving them food with other elements, And gifts, well, you mean I'm not full of myself? I need something from you, and I have to give a gift. I have to give up. That's expensive. That sweater I just bought. I could have done this and that. And of course, revealing my mind, I'm not going there. Just this vulnerability that just dawned on me here to speak. It really expects us to be vulnerable to each other.
Wonderful point. It expects us to be vulnerable. Receiving food is one of those things. Do you know that every head of state and every king has someone try their food first, right? Because it's a very vulnerable act. And we understand that this is true, not just on a physical level, as in someone could poison you or make you sick, but also on a subtle level, right? We understand in our tradition that someone is affecting you by giving you, they're transferring their consciousness to you. They're affecting you internally. Where you eat and who you eat from affects your character. So there's a lot of vulnerability in taking food from another and then giving them food. This is why we don't share our plate with everyone. We don't eat off of everyone's plate, right? This is something we do very carefully. And as a side note, this is why this is such a special thing in relation to Krishna also, right? The fact that he's willing to accept food that we make and that we're willing to receive food from him and eat food off his plate. This is a very, very deep, very vulnerable exchange. Krishna's willing to make himself vulnerable to us by saying, I'm going to trust what you're cooking, even though I've had a couple bad experiences, once with Krishna, feeding me something that was really poisonous, and once with someone else. Those are not good. But still, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're not Putana. You're not coming to me with some bad intention. He's making himself vulnerable. Excellent. Yes,
another thing, I'm trying to think of a word to capture it. Maybe you can help me, but it's like as devotees we want to serve. So I want to serve the prasadam, and to receive that service we often are hesitant or we resist. No, Prabhu, let me serve, or giving gifts, right? So it's like accepting service. It's kind of a vulnerability, I guess, in a sense, but accepting the service, because that allows a relationship to happen. And sometimes in the name of being humble we force not receiving, and it kind of hampers the relationship.
It's a very beautiful point, that in some sense all of them require us to accept service, not to just give, but to also accept service. Being fed is an act of great honor, right? And receiving a gift, even receiving a compliment, right? It's sometimes such a difficult thing for us to do as devotees, is to receive a compliment. How many times have you given a compliment to someone and that person says, oh, no, okay, and then changes the topic entirely? It happens all the time. How many times have you felt that urge? Say, oh, no, and walk away from it. And what you're doing as a result is you're cutting off that reciprocation. Right? Someone is giving you a gift. One of the best gifts you can give someone is a gift of words. It's considered to be a very valuable gift. In many ways, more than stuff. Right? Words go deep into the heart. Someone's giving you a gift, and what we do in the name of humility is we reject it. We say, nope, not me. Right? That's not me. Nope, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. That wasn't me at all. Right? And we think that's humility. But in fact, what we're doing is we're cutting off association. We're cutting off reciprocation. What as devotees, the humble thing to do is to accept it lovingly and then to return it. Right? Is to say, thank you so much. I really appreciate what you said. I hope I can live up to your words. And you know one thing I really appreciate about you too? Then we've completed the circle that creates association. Rather than saying, oh, no, that's not me. Yes,
Question. Sure. So in Chaitanya Bhagavata, we were reading this section where the Brahmana comes to Jagannath Mishra's house and he says, I'll get you to cook your stuff and we'll take care of everything, and then Nimai comes and eats it. So in that section, Jagannath Mishra is glorifying the Brahmana as an honored guest, and the Brahmana says, no, I'm just a wandering nonsense who goes wherever my mind takes me, from here to there. And I was just reflecting on, we have a culture in our society of self-deprecation, speaking badly about oneself. How does that fit into this conversation? And is that something that's Vaishnava-like, or is it something else?
Yeah, so this goes into a broader discussion of what humility means. I think humility begins with honesty. The foundation of humility is honesty. We begin with a genuine understanding of who we are and who Krishna is. And when we recognize that this is Krishna and this is me, it's natural to recognize I'm this small, Krishna is this big. If we truly recognize the good qualities of others, we come to realize they have wonderful attributes that I do not possess. But that humility, that self-deprecation, is miles away from low self-esteem, from demolishing of oneself. And here's why. Low self-esteem is essentially still focused on oneself. I'm not good enough. I don't have the capacity. I'm of no worth, etc., etc., etc. Whereas humility is fundamentally focused on the other. You are wonderful. Krishna is wonderful. And this is who I am in relation to you, right? So humility is focused outward and therefore results in happiness. To see the capacity and ability and glory of another. And maybe your smallness in relation, but that smallness gives you joy to recognize, oh, I'm tiny, I'm a particle of dust under Krishna's lotus feet. That gives a devotee joy. Whereas low self-esteem is still self-focused. I'm not good enough. I'm terrible. And therefore, it leads to sadness and depression and incapacity, and we lose our ability to do seva. Humility increases our ability to do seva, to serve, and low self-esteem reduces our abilities to do seva. So I think when we hear this self-deprecation from Vaishnavas, we have to be really careful the way we take it and who's speaking here. Because when they're talking, if it's coming from a genuine place of humility, they're not leaving that all depressed and upset about who they are. Right? By talking about themselves like that, their desire to serve has increased, their appreciation for others has increased. Whereas we might not be in that same situation if we deprecate ourselves. Okay, a lot of hands. I think you've been waiting for a while. Yes.
Yeah, I see it as within the ecosystem in our community. It's a way of caring for the whole ecosystem and for kindness in the ecosystem, like ultimately love and surrender within that ecosystem.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's caring, right? Every one of these is caring for the ecosystem, caring for each other. Notice what kinds of exchanges are not included in this list. Right? Often you can learn as much from what's left out as what is included within. Right? All these 3 loving exchanges, reciprocation, what's not included? Business exchanges are not included. They don't count as association. Right? Foreign exchange is not included as association. Exchange of money, exchange of goods and services. Right? Economics is not included in this. It's care. It's about care that's here. Excellent. What else? Yes?
A bit of a counterpoint, if you don't mind, Prabhu.
Yes.
This is a very loving Sangha, and I feel very safe with you all. So I'll be a little vulnerable, if you don't mind.
Sure.
In keeping with Venkat Bhatta's wonderful presentation yesterday, as we come into the fold of devotees and it's so loving and warm and embracing and we feel so comfortable, are there not some dangers if we're not using our discrimination as we receive so many possible, maybe some little bit of poison came into the Sangha? I've already said most of what I was going to say, but does that make sense to you? And so on one hand you have nowhere else to go, but on the other hand sometimes there's something that's a pinprick, if you will, that could undermine some of the trust and so on. And we saw that with the toxic masculinity as an example. There could be others. So,
Yeah.
Sorry to be the doubter.
No, that's not a doubt at all. In fact, we're coming to that in my discussion, in my presentation here. One of the things I wanted to talk about is what do we do when the association doesn't work out?
Okay.
And Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, we just wait just a few
Absolutely,
minutes.
absolutely.
And I'll get to that, because that's an important.
I was making a disturbance by not asking, so I had to ask.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very valuable thing. And if I don't fully address it, then please raise it again.
Thank you.
But hopefully we'll get to that very soon. Okay. So let's see. Venkata Prabhu, and then in the back, and then in the further back, and then you had your hand up also? Okay, there's a lot. But let's take this last row here. Everyone's sitting in a row, and then we move on. Yeah. Michael.
Stay away from it. So just two things, one an observation, and maybe adding to this list. I really, really appreciate your encouragement to accept compliments, and that's something that I struggled with for a long time, and I realized, so I just wanted to share a little bit about that. I realized that the more I did the no, you know, the hunger for compliments didn't actually go away. The hunger actually intensified. I just, once I got the compliment, I didn't know what to do with it, and I felt like almost, you know, like I would be revealed for how hungry I was for it, so I had to deflect. So it was actually kind of a very bizarre sort of, you know, vicious cycle. And what really, hearing others like sharing what you shared, what changed for me, I started just doing 2 or 3 things that you know, I just wanted to share if others find it helpful in accepting the compliment. One is to accept it and to take it as a form of encouragement, and to even tell the other person, thank you for saying that. I'm not sure I see it that way yet, but I take it as your encouragement to grow in that direction. And then the other thing, specifically around, like if I were to give a class and someone were to just come up to me afterwards and say, thank you for that nice class, Prabhu, or, you know, instead of saying, no, it was, you know, whatever, to ask them what they liked about it, what particularly struck a chord with them, which not only ensures that the compliment is actually coming from a genuine place, but also open the door to like more conversation, and then open the door to reciprocation, because now this person is sharing their reflections and I'm learning from them as well. So I wanted to share that, and it's such an important point. And then the thing that I wanted to maybe add to the list is, it's similar to some of the stuff that's already up there, but intimacy. It strikes me that all of these exchanges require intimacy, and then they build intimacy the more we do. When you eat with someone and you share food, it's such an intimate experience. Giving gifts, especially when those gifts reflect some personal connection or something, can be very intimate. So.
Thank you, wonderful. On your earlier point about the exchange of compliments, looking at it from the other side of like complimenting others, this is one of the things that I try to practice and encourage others to, is when we give a compliment, to really be specific about what it is that we're complimenting. Because it helps, it conveys, as you said, that it's genuine, that it's actually thoughtful and well meant, but it also helps us understand what is it about this person that I actually appreciate, right? What the prasad was really good for me. What about it was really good? You know, the sabji was just perfectly cooked, not too much, not too less, or the spicing on the samosas was just, whatever it is. I think if we practice specificity in compliments and practice receiving compliments, we can do this gift-giving exchange far more effectively and appreciate it. You know how Mahaprabhu says you have to be more humble than a blade of grass, which is really, you know, it's mind-blowing in terms of trying to think what that means. But then the next line he says, amanina manadena. One should not be eager to receive respect, one should be eager to give respect. And I've always thought that the manadena part is the place we need to start, right? Is giving honor to others. And if we do that often enough, here's the amazing thing. Devotees in general are really kind. And when you give honor to others, it comes right back because of this, because it's reciprocal. And the need to not be eager for honor, it starts to dissipate because you're in this ecosystem where you're giving and receiving, and you're giving honor, but you're also receiving it, right? And so that desire, embedded as it is in everyone's heart, it becomes calm, it becomes satisfied. If we start with that practice, manavena, giving that honor to others, finding a reason to compliment everyone, but making it specific so that it's genuine. Okay, yes, Prabhu.
I was going to say our tendency to seek comfort and finding commonality in shared value system.
Mm-hmm. A desire to find comfort in a shared value system.
Yeah, I mean, it should be comforting for me.
So each one of these, I'll add that here, comforting. Because there's a shared value system. Excellent. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes.
Speaking of the difference between humility and low self-esteem, there's a saying which I like. It says, humility is not about thinking less. It's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less.
Nice.
And I'd like to add trust to the list.
Trust. They all require trust. Wonderful. Just to add to your point, one of the things that emerges from humility is fearlessness. When we recognize that I'm not the one doing this, it's Krishna, then there's nothing that I'm afraid to do if Krishna says this is what I need to do. Right? If Krishna points the way and says, hey, this is your role, then we become fearless. Again, low self-esteem is a fearful state. Humility is a fearless state because the focus is Krishna can do this. I might not be able to do this, but magic happens when I let Krishna do it. Final comment.
Thank you, Prabhu. I just wanted to mention reflection and then question. In regards to intimacy, I just know myself in my lifetime struggle has been with sense control. And I see this intimacy as perhaps a way of giving a higher taste. These reciprocations between devotees, perhaps giving a higher taste. Then my question was, and I think you're probably going to touch on this, but I just wanted to put it out there. When we talk about doing an audit, an assessment of our association, how can we do it in such a way that we don't become judgmental? Because one of my fears is to be becoming like an uptight person who's always kind of got this radar out, judging everyone for their level of advancement and whether they're going to do me harm or not. And at the same time, I want to be a loving human being. So how do you balance this?
Wonderful. So let's move on. I think that's a great segue because that's where we need to go. I think both of your comments have certain things in common with each other, and I think we should go in that direction. So all these things, these 6 loving exchanges are so, they've got a lot of depth to them, and I think it's worth thinking about them at some length. There's one thing that I wanted to add to the list that's not already here, and that's that these are focused on, each one is focused on the other, on another person, right? So to give a gift, to actually give a gift, you have to really think about the person you're giving a gift to. What would they like? What would they appreciate? What would be meaningful for them, right? So it's really focused. You're feeding someone. But here's what I like to eat, Prabhu. You have it too. Right? That's okay. Something, right? I like it, you should have it too. But I think even more meaningful is what would you like to eat, right? And thinking about that person and what would please them and what kind of food works for them. Each one of these is focused very much on the other. And I think that's really crucial. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that they all take time. They all take a lot of time. To cultivate association, real association, not just acquaintance, not just collaboration, but association takes time and energy and effort. And this is one of the reasons we're asked to be selective about our association. Is yes, we don't want to be influenced by just anyone, but also it takes time. We can't reveal our mind in confidence and give gifts and keep up with everyone, right? It's an investment of time and energy in cultivating association, in participating in that ecosystem.
With time, I wanted to add, all of this is an ongoing process, right? Whether you're a Krishna or Hanumatpresaka Swami, this is an ongoing process. It just goes on forever.
Very good point. They're all ongoing. None of them stop. Okay, so last part, and then I'm low on time here. Okay, really quickly. Final part is shaping association, and
The
this is where
presentations are too interesting, that's the problem.
Thank you. Thank you. So here's shaping our association. Okay. Every devotee in Vrindavan, the gopis, the cowherd boys, they're all part of three ecosystems, if we will, three environments. Every gopi is a good citizen of Nanda Maharaj's kingdom. They milk the cows, they take that milk for sale to the market, they do their duties in a way that contributes to Nanda Maharaj's and the kingdom's prosperity and happiness. So they're a member of Braj as a community. Within that, every gopi and gopa have their own circle of friends and like-minded devotees with whom they serve Krishna and they share their realizations about Krishna. The most wonderful example of this, of all of these, is in the Venu Gita, the song of Krishna's flute. And the gopis are describing, to each other. They're saying, do you remember how Krishna did this? And the sound of this flute, do you see how it affects the peacocks? They start dancing like there's a cloud in the sky. And when they start dancing, everyone in Vrindavan, all the trees and plants become very happy. And they start dancing, following the peacocks. So they're sharing their realizations of who Krishna is and what he means to them. So every gopi is a citizen of Nanda Maharaj's kingdom. Each one has their own group of like-minded devotees with whom they serve and they love serving. And then each one has a personal, individual relationship with Krishna. That is theirs. And it's theirs alone. And they reflect upon this as well. So for each of us, our broad scope is that we want to be good citizens in Mahaprabhu's movement. And we participate in the broad spectrum of activities. We try not to create a disturbance. We try to do our duty. I've got this role to play, and that helps the temple keep running. And I contribute this each month for the temple's ongoing expenses. And I try to live by whatever practices are established by the GBC or by the authorities. This is how I try to pull my weight in the society of devotees. But within that society of devotees, we each have our community of devotees in whose association we feel inspired. And we feel like we want to serve Krishna with them. And when we have a realization that's just exploding inside us, we go to them to tell them about it. Right? That's a very special relationship. And then each one of us individually ought to have a personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada through his books, where we have our own desire to serve him and our commitment to serve him and our understanding of who he is and what he wants of us. Right? So we can think of association. And the nice thing about this is sometimes one of these circles of association is on the rocks in our spiritual life. Right? Things are not going well with the institution. I was just told off, and it's been such a headache, and so on. So what do? If we have the other two, we can take comfort and solace in our circle of devotees, in our personal relationship with Prabhupada, and keep things going. Occasionally, it's our community of devotees that's not working out. We've had a problem. Someone turned out to be who they're not. Someone who we look up to fell down. And we had a fall down that was shocking to us. We take shelter of the broader community of devotees. We say, I got a family, a big family. And yes, my immediate family, I lost my father, lost my mother, or, my best friend just went crazy. They turned out to be someone I didn't expect them to be. But it's okay. I've got a bigger family. And I've got my relationship with Prabhupada. And occasionally, we might be unstable in our relationship with Prabhupada. There may be things that don't make sense to us in his books, or we may be struggling with some philosophical issue or whatever. I've got my friends in Krishna consciousness, and we know how we want to serve. So, faith, I like to say, is a composite thing. It's not a monolithic thing. It's not one thing. Faith is made of all kinds of parts and pieces. There's intellectual ideas in faith. There's the emotional side of faith. There's the devotional side of faith. So association is also composite. It's many different ecosystems. And it's important to have not just one ecosystem we're part of. Because at some point in our spiritual lives, in our lives as devotees, that ecosystem is going to take a hit. Because it's the material world. And because human beings are flawed. And someone's going to let us down. And someone may even hurt us. And we need to have multiple ecosystems so we can seek refuge in other places. Okay? Not just one. You get one ecosystem that you're part of and nothing else, that starts becoming a cult. It's more or less what a cult is. It's a single ecosystem centered on a single person. And it's all or nothing. And that person lets you down, and boom, everything's finished. Right? So multiple circles, multiple ecosystems that we're part of. The last question. What do we do when association goes wrong? What do we do when we end up in association we don't like? There's two sides to this. One is the really bad stuff, right? When association that we thought would be good ends up harmful or abusive or dangerous. Then there's no space for vulnerability, intimacy, trust. That's been shattered. And at that point, two things. We have to extract ourselves from that ecosystem quickly. And second thing is, we need to make sure we've got other ecosystems that can support us. Right? The point I was just making. Now, drastic and dangerous situations aside, what happens when we're in a situation where the association is not necessarily harmful or abusive or bad, it's just association that is not working out for us. And we can't get along with the devotees that are involved, or we're not like-minded, we're always fighting, and it's just where someone's always trying to undermine us and so on. There's two things to keep in mind. One a little easier, one a little tougher. First of all, sometimes association doesn't work out. And when it doesn't, we need an exit strategy. We need a way to get out. And here's the point I want to make. Exit strategies are just as important as entrance strategies. When we exit an ecosystem, again, assuming this is not a situation where things are abusive and dangerous, if it's just not working out, we have a responsibility to exit in the right way. Because when you tear someone out of an ecosystem, you can leave that ecosystem in shambles, right? I mean, think of a cave. Underground caves are ecosystems. Anyway, I don't have time to go into it, but every element, from the bats to the blind salamanders to everyone, has a role to play. And as the bat numbers go down, as is happening around the country, the whole ecosystem fails. Everyone dies. Because the bats bring in nutrients from outside through their poop. And that everyone uses that.
That's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, very interesting. Sorry, this is kind of a backward analogy. So the point is, when you have to pull yourself out, it's a big responsibility, how you exit. Create an exit strategy. Do it gradually. Try your best to find someone else to fit that role, so you have some succession in mind. And then give everyone a warning, explain your actions. This is not working out to me. I really appreciate the service you are doing. It's very important. And the whole group is doing. I've just come to a point in my life where this is not working for me for these reasons. Because if we exit without an exit strategy, without compassion, we often leave wounds behind. Right? Just dropping things cold can be very painful for everyone else involved. So that's one thing, is having the exit strategy. And second thing is, if we find ourselves constantly in association that we don't appreciate, perhaps we need to look at ourselves. Because here's the thing, not only are we affected by people around us, but we attract people like us to ourselves. We draw people towards us that are like us. This is why if there's someone in your environment that you can't stand and you run away from them, perhaps you move 1,000 miles away. What happens? You find someone just like them. They didn't go anywhere. They've got a new shape and a new height and a new name, but it's the same guy. And the reason is because maybe we're the ones who are the magnet for that kind of person. And we need to look into ourselves and figure out what kind of association am I drawing to me. And so this is my final point, which is to say that it's not just about finding association. It's about creating association. There is no place in the world without association. Nowhere. And I say this simply from experience. I grew up in a place that no one had ever heard about, Boise, Idaho. My first job was in a place no one had ever heard about, Danville, Kentucky. I now live in a place that no one's ever heard about, Logan, Utah. Right? You don't need to be in a community of 100 devotees to find like-minded association. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. We need to create that association for ourselves. We need to create that, and we need to create people we can live with. And that means we need to think about who we are and what kind of association we're creating. Our first and foremost location for the creation of association is our own families. In looking for association all over the world and all over the internet, we often forget that our most consistent partners in association are right with us in the next bedroom or in the same bedroom. And that association is the association we spend most of our time with. And so when we do our association audit, if we recognize that we're not doing those 6 loving exchanges with people in our family, if the most we ever do is shout to-do lists from across the kitchen counter, then we're missing a huge association opportunity. We may even be creating association that we can't stand. Every father and every mother get their karma through their kids. Whatever you put out into the world comes back to you through your kids. Because you're shaping their natures. Not entirely, they have their own natures. But we create their natures by our behavior So when we're looking to creating association, it's important to finding that association. It's important to look at our own family, our husbands, our wives, our children, first and foremost, and say, what kind of association do I have here? And then from there we look outward. And if we look outward, we'll find that there is association everywhere. Even Prahlad, in the middle of the worst association possible. We always talk about it in terms of tolerance, but think of him in terms of association. He grew up in a family that was driven by one overpowering emotion. His father, Hiranyakashipu, was driven by one overpowering emotion, which was what? Revenge. That's what he grew up in. Getting revenge is the purpose of our family. These guys are your enemies, and these are your friends. And what did Prahlad do? He was not passive in that terrible association. He resisted that association by saying, I refuse to accept the categories of friend and enemy. I'm not going to take it. I'm going to question the categories themselves. And he turned around and he said, I'm going to create the association that I want, the association I can live with. And so he turned to his schoolmates and he created a community of devotees in a place where no one thought it was possible. In the jaws of the demon himself. Right there, he created good association. So it's everywhere to be found. All we have to do is do our association audit. And when we find something missing, turn to the 6 exchanges of association and try to inculcate those, to create those in our own families, in our communities, wherever in the world we might be. Okay, I went over time. I'm so sorry, but thank you so much.